The morning at Camp Blackwater began with the same ritual as the last 8 years. Staff Sergeant Claire Morrison was checking the gear of new recruits, helping an awkward Private Tommy Parker properly fasten his tactical vest. The kid was shaking so hard that the carabiners jingled like wind chimes in a hurricane. Before continuing this story, please comment below with your city or country where you're watching from. Your feedback inspires us to do better. Easy there, son, she said gently, adjusting the straps on his shoulders. First day's always terrifying. Remember how to breathe under load? Tommy nodded, gratitude shining in his eyes. He was one of those kids the Army either broke in the first week or forged into real soldiers. Claire had seen hundreds like him. Thank you, Sergeant. I'm just nervous. That's normal. She patted his shoulder. Stay close to me on the course. I'll show you how it's done. At that moment, Captain Daniel Hawkins approached them. Tall, with perfect posture and a smile that never reached his eyes. Behind him followed his usual entourage, Sergeant Michael Stone, built like a heavyweight boxer, Corporal Eric Larson with his perpetually disgruntled expression, and Private Ryan Owen, who tried desperately to look tough. Morrison, Hawkins's voice was sweet as honey laced with poison. Babysitting the failures again? This is elite training, not daycare. Claire slowly straightened up, 42 years old, average height, with an ordinary face that wouldn't stand out in a crowd. Dark brown hair pulled back in a strict bun, but if you looked closely, and few people bothered, you might notice that her eyes constantly moved, tracking exits, blind spots, potential threats, like someone who'd learned to survive in places where relaxation meant death. Just helping a fellow soldier, sir, she replied evenly. Helping? Hawkins laughed, and his cronies dutifully joined in. Maybe you should change their diapers, too, or tell them bedtime stories. Tommy reddened, but Claire placed a hand on his shoulder, preventing him from speaking up. Whatever you say, sir. Exactly. Hawkins turned to his entourage. Some people get into elite programs through merit, others through management's pity. The words were spoken loud enough for half the parade ground to hear. Claire watched them go, mentally cataloging faces. The same habit as checking weapons before a mission. Red Rock Range stretched under Nevada's copper sky. Targets shimmered in the desert haze at 200 meters. For a soldier with Claire's service record, and according to her personnel file, it included 3 combat deployments and expert marksman qualification. This should have been a walk in the park. Claire took position on the firing line, checked her weapon, inserted the magazine. The instructor's commands echoed down the line in the familiar cadence every soldier knew. Shooters, you have 30 rounds, 10 targets, 3 minutes. Prepare to fire. Rifles rose in unison. Bolts clicked. Safeties snapped. Fire! The line erupted in controlled chaos. 30 soldiers sent lead downrange at whatever speed accuracy allowed. Brass arced through the air. Targets jerked and swayed under bullet impacts, except at Claire's position. She raised her rifle smoothly, sight picture perfect, breathing controlled. For a moment it seemed she was about to shoot. Then she lowered the weapon. Her finger never even approached the trigger. She stood gazing into the distance with the expression of someone listening to music only she could hear. When the ceasefire whistle sounded a minute later, her target was untouched. Clean as if it had just been hung. Instructor Sergeant Rodriguez approached, jaw clenched so tight his teeth might crack. Morrison, planning to shoot today or just enjoying the scenery? Planning to shoot, Sergeant, she replied calmly. Then shoot. That's what we're here for. Copy that. Second string. Same result. Rifle up, perfect stance, weapon down without a single shot fired. The instructor furiously scribbled something in his notebook while the other 30 soldiers chewed through ammunition like free samples at Costco. By the time firing concluded, whispers were already spreading down the line like smoke. Claire left the range with the same unhurried gait she'd arrived with, ignoring the stares that followed her to the equipment shed. Guess her qualification records don't transfer. Hawkins' voice carried just far enough. Wonder what else doesn't transfer. The obstacle course was where strong soldiers learned they weren't as strong as they thought. Rope climbing, wall scaling, crawling through sand that worked its way into every crevice of your uniform. The kind of physical torture that separated wheat from chaff. Claire's squad lined up at the starting line, sweat already darkening their fatigues despite the early hour. The instructor briefed them with the enthusiasm of someone who'd watched thousands of soldiers discover just how much their bodies could hate them. 15 obstacles, 30 minutes. Fall behind the group and you'll be running it again this afternoon in full battle rattle. Questions? Nobody was stupid enough to ask questions. Whistle blast. Soldiers charged toward the first obstacle like someone had kicked an anthill. Claire started at the same measured pace she used for everything else. Not fast, not slow, just purposeful. She reached the 12-foot wall third in line, waited her turn, then approached at that same measured pace. Stone scrambled over it with grunts and curses, landing heavily in the sand beyond. Larson followed with the fluid motion of someone who'd been doing this since he was 12. Claire approached the wall, looked at it for exactly 3 seconds, then sat down cross-legged in the sand at its base. Closed her eyes. "Morrison!" Stone bellowed from the other side. "What the hell are you doing?" She didn't answer, didn't move, just sat breathing steadily while her squad mates stared in bewilderment. "Move your ass!" Larson barked. "We're on a timer!" The stopwatch ticked. Other squads flowed around them, soldiers grunting and cursing their way over the obstacle. Claire sat motionless, hands resting on her knees, looking like she was meditating in a Zen garden rather than in the middle of a combat training course. When her squad rounded the far turn 15 minutes later, uniforms soaked with sweat and sand, she stood up, dusted off her pants, and jogged to catch up with them. Fell back into formation without a word, as if sitting in the dirt for a quarter hour was the most natural thing in the world. Hawkins yanked off his helmet, face red with exertion and fury. Outstanding. Just outstanding. Hope the enemy waits while you take a nap. Nervous laughter rippled through the group. Claire kept walking, eyes straight ahead, expression unchanged. Maybe she's conserving energy for something important, Owen suggested weakly, though he didn't look convinced himself. "Yeah," Stone spat sand. "For the trip home." Urban combat simulation was where training became real. 2-story plywood buildings arranged like an actual city block, with narrow alleys, stairwells, and corners you couldn't clear in a lifetime. It was as close to actual combat as you could get, without people trying to kill you for real. Claire's squad assembled at Building Alpha, weapons loaded with simulation rounds that stung like hell but wouldn't send you to the hospital. The instructor briefed them with the practiced efficiency of someone who'd run this scenario 1,000 times. Hostage rescue. Unknown number of enemy. Civilian actors mixed in. Watch your targets, watch your fire, and finish in 15 minutes. Clock starts when the door opens. Hawkins checked his weapon one last time, adrenaline already sharpening his movements. "Stone, breacher. Owen, stay on my 6. Larson, watch our rear." Morrison. He paused, looking at her like equipment he wasn't sure was working properly. "Try to keep up." Claire nodded once. No argument, no objection, just acknowledgement. The ram hit the door with a crash that echoed through the plywood walls. Splinters flew, hinges screamed, and Hawkins charged through the breach with rifle ready. "Go, go, go!" Stone followed. Then Owen, then Larson, boots thundering on plywood floors as they flowed into the building. Claire entered last, weapon ready, eyes tracking corners and shadows. Then she moved to a corner of the first room, sat against the wall, and closed her eyes. The simulation unfolded exactly as predictably as you'd expect. A civilian actor jumped out from behind a desk. Training rifles spat paint. Hawkins took a hit to the helmet before he could correct his aim. A siren marked him as a casualty. Contact front. Owen tried to engage but froze when a second actor appeared in a doorway, taking a paint round to the shoulder. Another siren, another casualty. Stone fought like a man possessed, but the actors had the angles and initiative. Third contact from a second-floor window dropped him too. Paint splattered across his helmet and vest. In 30 seconds, 3/4 of the squad was down, and Claire Morrison sat in her corner with closed eyes, breathing steadily, as if napping while her teammates bled synthetic blood on the plywood floor. The exercise siren wailed. Red lights flashed. Game over. Hawkins ripped off his helmet, face streaked with fury and humiliation. He marched across the room to where Claire sat, jabbing his finger in the air between them. "You didn't fire a single shot. Just sat there while we got slaughtered. What the hell is wrong with you?" Claire opened her eyes and stood, brushing sawdust from her uniform. "Rear was secure," she said calmly. "Secure?" Hawkins's voice cracked into humorless laughter. "We're all dead, Sergeant. Every damn one of us. What rear is that?" The instructor stepped between them before the situation could escalate further, but his expression was no less grim than Hawkins's. "Morrison, if this continues, you'll be washed out by week's end. That's an official warning. Show improvement, or you're done." "Copy that, Sergeant," she replied. No defense, no argument. Just the same unflappable calm she'd shown since day one. But something in her eyes was different. Not defiance, not anger, just a flicker of something that hadn't been there before. Like someone had turned on a light in a room that had been dark for a long time. By dinner, the nicknames had hardened like concrete. Sleepwalker followed Claire through the chow line, spoken loud enough for her to hear. Narcolepsy floated around whenever she appeared in formation. The 4 soldiers who'd been trying to drag her through training had made it their personal mission to remind everyone, especially her, that she didn't belong. "Hey, Sleepwalker," Hawkins called when she walked past their table with her tray. "Planning another nap tomorrow or going to try staying awake this time?" Owen snickered into his mashed potatoes. "Maybe she needs an alarm clock." Something loud enough to wake the dead weight. Larson smirked over his coffee cup. Or a discharge. Either way, problem solved. Stone just shook his head with the disgust of a professional soldier watching someone make a mockery of everything he believed in. She's going to get someone killed out there. Mark my words. Claire walked to the far end of the mess hall, sat alone, and ate methodically. Same portion sizes, same pace, same alert observation of her surroundings that she brought to everything else. When she finished, she stood, cleared her tray, and left without glancing at the table behind her. But Master Chief Rodriguez was watching. Had been watching since day one, and what he saw didn't match what everyone else was seeing. Most people looked at Claire Morrison and saw someone who didn't care. Someone who'd given up. Someone who probably shouldn't be carrying a weapon. The Master Chief saw someone whose gear was laid out with precision that spoke of years spent in places where disorder meant death. Someone who moved through the base like she'd memorized every corner, every exit, every potential threat vector. Someone whose hands, when she thought no one was looking, performed weapon manipulations with a fluidity that contradicted every clumsy performance on the range. These weren't the habits of someone who'd quit. These were the reflexes of someone who'd learned to survive in very dangerous places. The question was whether Claire Morrison was broken or just switched off. The breaking point came during the final assessment exercise, full-scale urban assault simulation, multiple buildings, actors armed with everything from pistols to machine guns. The kind of scenario that separated real operators from wannabes. Claire's squad lined up at the starting point, weapons loaded, faces grim with the weight of everything riding on the next 30 minutes. Another failure, and she was gone. Everyone knew it, including her. The instructor laid out the scenario with military brevity. Building by building clearance, unknown number of hostiles, civilian actors scattered throughout. Points for speed, accuracy, and casualty prevention. Failures will be noted and acted upon. His eyes found Claire in the formation. No words were necessary. This was her last chance. Hawkins adjusted his helmet, jaw tight with determination. "All right, people. Let's do this right. Stone, you're on point. Owen, watch the corners. Larson, cover R6. Morrison," he paused, looking at her with something between pity and disgust. "Try not to fall asleep. Whistle blast." Stone hit the first door, ram swinging like a sledgehammer. Wood exploded, hinges shrieked, and the squad poured through the breach. Claire entered last as always, weapon ready but already drifting toward the shadows. She found a corner in the first room, settled against the wall, and closed her eyes. Same as always. Same as every exercise for 2 weeks straight. The squad flowed deeper into the building, leaving her behind like forgotten furniture. Within minutes, familiar sounds echoed through the plywood walls. Shouts, simulated gunfire, sirens marking casualties. Outside the training area, Master Chief Rodriguez watched through observation windows with growing concern. 2 weeks of this pattern, and he was beginning to wonder if Claire Morrison could be salvaged. Then everything changed. A black SUV appeared without warning, engine purring through the main gate like it belonged there. Government plates, tinted windows, the kind of vehicle that made people stop what they were doing and pay attention. Commander Jake Steele stepped out of the passenger side, and the entire training yard went quiet. Mid-50s, weathered the way people get from years spent in hard places doing difficult things. His uniform was pressed but functional. No ribbons for show, just the basics. But it was how he moved that drew everyone's attention. Purposefully, economically, like someone who'd learned that wasted motion could get you killed. He walked directly to where the Master Chief stood watching the exercise, boots crunching on gravel. "Master Chief Rodriguez," Steele said, his voice carrying without effort. "I understand you have Staff Sergeant Claire Morrison in this rotation." Rodriguez straightened slightly. "Yes, sir. She's in the middle of an assessment." "I know." Steele's eyes found the building where Claire's squad was still fighting through actors. "I'd like to observe." "Sir, she's scheduled for washout. Her performance has been—" "I've read the reports." Steele cut him off gently but firmly. "I'm not here to challenge your evaluation, Master Chief. I just want to see how she handles one more scenario." Rodriguez studied the commander's face, searching for clues about what was really happening here. "What kind of scenario are we talking about, sir?" The corner of Steele's mouth twitched in what might have been a smile, one where she's allowed to wake up. Inside Building Alpha, the simulation was falling apart with predictable efficiency. Hawkins took a paint round to the helmet and was marked as a casualty. Owen was down with a chest wound. Stone fought desperately but was losing ground to actors who knew every angle in the building. And Claire Morrison sat in her corner with closed eyes, breathing steadily, oblivious to the chaos around her. That's when Steele's voice cut through the training yard like a blade through silk. "Morrison!" The single word carried through plywood walls, through the noise of simulated combat, through 2 weeks of conditioning that had kept Claire in sleep mode. She opened her eyes. "Morrison, recall protocol. Execute." The transformation was instantaneous and absolute. Claire rose in one fluid motion, rifle snapping to her shoulder, muscle memory taking over like someone had flipped a switch. The lethargy vanished, replaced by something fierce, focused, and utterly professional. She flowed out of the corner like water finding its level, weapon tracking angles that hadn't even developed yet. When the first actor appeared in a doorway, she was already firing. Controlled pair to center mass, target down before he could bring his weapon to bear. Hawkins, still sprawled on the floor with his fatal head wound, could only stare as Claire moved past him with surgical precision. This wasn't the same person who'd slept through exercises for 2 weeks. This was someone else entirely. She cleared the first floor in 90 seconds, moving from room to room with the kind of tactical movement they taught in very expensive schools to very dangerous people. Every angle anticipated, every threat neutralized before it could develop. Every movement designed to conserve energy and maximize efficiency. Upstairs, actors waited with the kind of complex ambush that usually shredded even experienced squads. Claire flowed into it like she'd designed the scenario herself. 2 contacts from flanking positions. She dropped both with precise shots before they could coordinate fire. A third from a concealed position that should have been impossible to spot. She put him down while transitioning between the other 2. In the observation area, instructors stopped taking notes to watch. Stopwatches hung forgotten in suddenly slack hands. This wasn't just good shooting or tactics. This was art. When Claire reached the final room, a hostage scenario that had stumped squads all month, she didn't pause at the threshold to assess the situation. She read the geometry in a glance, calculated angles and backgrounds, and moved. The actors holding the civilian hostage never understood what happened. 2 shots, both targets down, hostage freed before anyone else in the building had even processed what was occurring. The exercise siren sounded, but this time it was the long, clear tone that meant mission accomplished. Claire safetied her weapon, helped the hostage to his feet, and signaled all clear to the observation post. Her breathing was steady, controlled. Whatever had awakened in her was already hiding back behind the professional mask. In the staging area, her squad mates stared in stunned silence. Hawkins pulled off his helmet, paint still dripping from the hit on his forehead, eyes wide with something that looked more like fear than respect. "What the hell was that?" he demanded, voice cracking. "How did you— Who are you?" Claire checked her weapon, ensured it was safe, and for the first time in 2 weeks, really looked at him. "Same person I've always been," she said quietly. "You just never had clearance to see it." The debrief room was small and windowless, smelling faintly of gun oil, and the kind of disinfectant they use in places where people discuss things that never make it into official reports. Claire sat on one side of a folding table, weapon disassembled for cleaning. Across from her, Commander Steele and Master Chief Rodriguez tried to make sense of what they'd just witnessed. "Recall protocol," Steele said without preamble. "Classified program. Need to know clearance. Small teams, deep insertion, high-value targets in denied areas." Rodriguez leaned back in his chair, arms crossed. "And Sergeant Morrison was part of this?" "She was the best part of it." Steele's voice carried the weight of absolute certainty. 18 months of operations in places that officially don't exist, doing things that officially never happened. Perfect mission record, 0 friendly casualties, 100% extraction rate. Rodriguez looked at Claire, who was running a cleaning patch through her barrel with the same methodical precision she applied to everything. "So what happened? Why the transfer to regular training?" Claire's hand stopped for just a moment. "Medical rotation. Took shrapnel on the last mission. Spent 6 months in recovery while command decided if I was still fit for the program." "Recall operatives are conditioned to compartmentalize," Steele explained. "They learn to suppress their combat reflexes until they receive proper authorization. It's a safety measure. Keeps them from going operational during routine activities." "Authorization," Rodriguez repeated slowly. "Like what you said on the range?" "Exactly. Without the right code phrase, recall operatives function like any other soldier. With it." He gestured toward the window, where Claire's range performance was already being analyzed by instructors who couldn't quite believe what they'd seen. "They become what they were trained to be." Rodriguez was quiet for a long moment. "So for 2 weeks she was essentially— What, playing dumb?" "Not playing," Claire said quietly. "Suppressing." "The conditioning isn't something you can turn off like a light switch. It's more like keeping a guard dog on a leash. It's still a guard dog, but it won't bite until someone gives permission." Steele nodded. Command wanted to see if she could integrate into regular units after her injury. Thought maybe the conditioning had been compromised, that she'd lost the ability to operate at that level. And had she? "You saw what happened, Master Chief. Does that look compromised to you?" Rodriguez rubbed his face, processing the implications. "So now she gets reassigned somewhere her skills can be used properly?" "Advanced Training Command, Special Operations Cadre," Steele said. "Not as a student, but as an instructor." Claire finished reassembling her rifle, each part falling into place with practiced precision. "Wherever I'm needed." "But not as a curiosity," Steele agreed. "Just a professional doing professional work for people who understand what that means." The paperwork was processed within hours, the washout recommendation removed, replaced by transfer orders that would send Claire Morrison somewhere her particular skill set would be valued rather than misunderstood. But the story didn't end with paperwork. That evening in the barracks, the atmosphere was different. Not hostile anymore, but not comfortable either. The kind of tension that appears when people realize they've been sharing space with someone far more dangerous than they'd imagined. Hawkins approached her bunk while she was packing, helmet in his hands like a peace offering he wasn't sure how to present. "Morrison, look, we didn't know what you could do." Claire looked up from her duffel bag. "You weren't supposed to know." "But why didn't you show them earlier? Would have saved yourself all the grief." Her answer was simple and devastating. "Because I wasn't authorized." Stone and Larson kept their distance, addressing her only when military courtesy required it. But Rodriguez noticed they'd started studying combat footage differently, paying attention to the spaces between movements, the moments of apparent inaction that preceded decisive action. In the days that followed, the squad quickly felt the changes. Claire now operated differently. Not flashy, not for show, but every step, every gesture was filled with quiet confidence and knowledge. Regular training became lessons not just in discipline, but in much deeper tactics for the rest of them. Owen approached her near the supply shed one evening. Honestly, I didn't want to laugh back then. It's just, everyone was pretending they knew everything, and it turns out they didn't know jack. Claire shook her head. That's normal. Most people prefer to judge by first impressions. Real work is always under the skin, and you can't see it until it's time. What's it like, being someone everyone underestimates? Owen asked, trying to find the right words. More interesting than it seems. Claire smiled with a hint of irony. First, it's a little annoying. Then you stop paying attention, and then you realize it works in your favor. While everyone's busy talking, you're watching your surroundings and preparing. And when the time comes, they don't have the slightest chance. In the mess hall now, other trays often appeared near her table. Those who had previously avoided her sat nearby, hoping to overhear, to pick up something unnoticed in her behavior. Evenings on the parade ground, couriers brought stacks of documents, new assignments, routes, scenario analyses. Claire worked on them longer than anyone else, but now people approached her table, asking advice, sometimes just listening to learn how to listen to silence. One day, Master Chief Rodriguez held her back after formation. Morrison, heard you've already received instructions for your new position. Yes, sir. Special Instructor Training Unit. I'll be working with the strangest recruits and the most stubborn officers. And how do you feel about that? Claire looked out the window, where sunset reflected in the glass of the barracks. I'm tired of being someone's secret. Maybe it's time to be someone's support. Rodriguez grinned. You've been support longer than any of us. They should learn from you what it means to be a real professional. And professions always need shadows, sir. In shadows, it's easier to remember why you're here. He nodded. Don't forget that the strongest aren't those who make noise, but those who know when to stay quiet. Before her transfer, Claire decided to speak with several members of her squad. In the instructor's room, where everyone gathered after the cycle ended for final debriefing, she found Larson sorting through papers. Larson, she called, got a minute? Sure, have a seat. She sat across from him, eyes focused on the map of last week's exercises. You held the rear well while the others rushed forward, she said. But you think too often that retreat is failure. Sometimes the strongest move is to pause and take a different position. Larson took a pause, thinking, I'm not used to waiting. The faster you move, the more control you feel. Real control is knowing that every move you make has purpose, not just doing it for show. Larson looked at her carefully, for the first time without dissatisfaction. I think I understand, Sergeant. Thank you. That same evening, Stone approached Claire, his face showing internal conflict. This boxer was rarely seen embarrassed. Morrison, listen. I want to apologize. I was too rough. Didn't understand what was happening. Stone, don't apologize. Roughness is a mask for fear. We all wear it sometimes. I've been rewatching your assault at night, trying to break down every moment. You move like you can see through walls. Claire smiled slightly. Not through walls, but through probabilities. What matters isn't movement, but the order of thoughts. Did you always look at us that way? I saw some future in all of you. Someone will become a good commander. Someone an instructor. Someone will just leave but always know where to look for an exit. My role isn't to dominate, but to teach you to see differently. Stone clenched his fist. Thank you. This week was the weirdest damn thing in all my service, but I learned a lot. After dinner, Hawkins approached her. Claire, He stumbled, forgetting his commanding tone for the first time. I was sure I understood everything about people, but you completely overturned my assumptions. Maybe that's the point of such exercises. She looked at his face, no longer hostile but confused. Exactly. People we consider unnecessary are often the most necessary. You might not believe it, but I know that now. Then the lesson worked. They laughed. For the first time in the entire rotation. At the graduation formation, Claire stood at the very end of the line, far from the command staff. Her uniform was clean but usually strict, without extra flourish. The commanding officer handed out new assignments to everyone, and when he reached her name, he deliberately hesitated. Morrison, Claire, transfer to advanced senior instructor training, he read, for some reason not looking at her. A quiet hooray, mixed with respectful silence, spread across the parade ground. The next moment, someone from the new soldiers threw out dryly, "At least she'll teach us how to sleep properly." Laughter spread through the group, this time good-naturedly, not with mockery, but with a smile that felt like the former wolf among. Sheep was gone, and the sheep knew it. Walking down the corridor to her new office, Claire paused at the window, watching the sunset over the desert. Rodriguez quietly approached her. "Going to the special training group?" he asked without beating around the bush. "Yes, sir. I think I'd be more useful there than anywhere else." "Well, excellent. Just remember, sometimes the strongest wolves walk alone." Claire smiled. "I always knew that." The group Claire took over was a cocktail of the strangest and most contradictory characters. There were sergeants with family problems, officers who once considered themselves stars but now feared failure, as well as newcomers, restless, noisy, anxious. First thing, Claire called everyone for an open dialogue. "We don't have the right to make mistakes," she said, "but we have the right to be ourselves. Fear is normal. It needs to be acknowledged. You think flaws are a sentence. Actually, they're a unique source of strength." The silence was deep. Some were hearing such directness for the first time. "I want everyone to be able to tell me not only about their successes every morning, but about what didn't work. Nobody here will shame you for failure." Corporal Richard Blake asked, "What if I messed up in exercises?" "If you messed up," Claire smiled, "come to me. I'll tell you how to turn any mistake into strategy." For the first time, the group didn't laugh. Several officers sighed heavily, as if shedding fatigue accumulated over years of service. In the first weeks of training, she observed every exercise, every argument, every conflict. One day, Corporal James Hunter snapped at a new private. "Aren't you listening at all? How can you act so stupid?" Claire approached calmly. "James, how would you have acted in his place if you didn't know the whole scheme yet?" Hunter hesitated. "I don't know. Probably would have made mistakes too." "There you go." Claire turned to the group. "The question isn't who made a mistake, but who helps you get up after the mistake. That's what a real team is." In the evenings, she told them stories. Not all were from operational reports. Some were made up by her. But in each story was a lesson about patience, about trust, about silent support. "There are people," she said one day, looking out the window, "who seem to us not as they should be. But maybe exactly such people are needed at the critical moment." Corporal Andrew McCartney always smiled around others, but alone suffered from fear of failure because his father was a famous general. Officer Luis Harris lost 2 friends in exercises and always tried to replace fear with jokes. Private Megan Woods considered herself worthless because she once nearly drowned during a forced march and now feared water. All of them, different, but with their own wolf wounds. Once during major joint exercises, a malfunction occurred. An alarm signal went off, the team found itself surrounded, the action plan broken. Claire watched from the leadership position. Officers were confused, rookies began to panic, some slowly abandoned equipment and ran, forgetting instructions. Then Claire, grabbing the radio, said briefly, "Blake, analysis mode, engage. McCartney, take charge of the action plan. Megan, you're responsible for the rear." At first, nobody understood. Then everything unfolded exactly according to her scenario. Those who previously considered themselves weak suddenly took responsibility. Those who hid behind masks stepped forward. 20 minutes later, the alarm was lifted, the exercise completed perfectly. Later that evening in headquarters under the stairs sat Megan, no longer afraid of water, but sitting on the floor, washed by rain. "Sergeant Morrison," she said, "I thought I'd never really be needed by anyone. You changed my fear." "Not me, Megan," Claire sat down beside her. "You did it yourself. I just showed you where to look for the door." That evening, everyone gathered in the hall for the final meeting of the cycle. Rodriguez, now commander of the entire center, addressed the group. "This month you went through the hardest test, learning to hear not only yourself but each other." He paused, then continued. "And remember, sometimes those who look ordinary turn out to be the strongest. Those who sleep will wake up when their time comes. Learn to recognize such people." Everyone looked at Claire. She stood a little apart, calmly, without fanfare. "Morrison," Rodriguez called, "say your word as a mentor." Claire stepped forward, surveyed the hall. Time to learn to see through masks. Time to understand that lessons can be not only loud, but quiet. The most important thing, when a strong person doesn't show their strength, but shares it with those who are still learning to be strong. The silence in the hall was like after a gunshot. Then applause broke out, quiet, genuine. The story of Claire Morrison spread beyond Camp Blackwater, becoming legend in the special operations community. Not because she was the fastest or the strongest, but because she understood something fundamental that most warriors never learn. True strength isn't about dominating others, but about lifting them up when it matters most. Years later, when former students would speak of their training, they wouldn't remember the drills or the scores. They'd remember the quiet woman who taught them that sometimes the most dangerous person in the room is the one everyone underestimates. The one who sleeps until the moment comes to wake up and remind the world what a professional looks like when lives are on the line. In a world full of noise, Claire Morrison had mastered the art of silence. And in that silence, she'd found something more valuable than any medal or commendation. The ability to see potential where others saw only problems, to find strength where others saw only weakness. The sleeping warrior had awakened not just herself, but everyone around her. And that, perhaps, was the greatest victory of all.